organization. We're going to have impersonators, imposters, or I don't know. Hey, what are they called?
I call them
Enactors at the gazebo. At the gazebo. So we're going to start. We're going to have Ben Franklin, Betsy Ross, and Abe Lincoln. So if you can check out the website, it'll be on there if you didn't get those times, and come out and participate in that. And then right after that, the Art League of Rockwall is going to have displays in the Bailey House. We're excited. This first display in years, so we're excited about that. So come for that. Those who missed the bus tour, my aunt got on to me because she didn't get information on the bus tour. Where is she? Yeah, right. And so I want to make sure that you all hear about the next bus tour. It's going to be in July, and it was real fun. It's led by narrated by Mark Russo, and it's across Rockwall County. It is really fun. So I hope all of you come out. And then you get to stop for a Boots burger. So it's not all bad. So at this time, Joy, if I can. Joy has heard that. Brian, you want to come on? Sure. Joey, I want to introduce what?
I have one other thing that I'd like to Patty and I have already discussed, and we thought it needed to be mentioned. Today, coming in, was one of our stellar families that have attended a lot of our lectures and stuff, and they missed the last couple because of health reasons and stuff like that. But MJ Scott and her husband came in today, Chuck, and donated a $5,000 check.
Anybody want to beat that today? Okay. All right. Next up is Joy Bounce, and she's going to talk about one of my favorite people in the world, her mama. But before she starts doing that, we're going to invite my aunt, my very favorite aunt, to come up, and she's going to say a prayer and introduce Joy.
Don't embarrass me.
Joy asked me to introduce her, but first of all, Joy asked me if we could pray. So I asked Darlene if we could pray. We had to go through an act of Congress to find out if we could pray. So, will you bow your heads? We're going to pray for Joy. God of our yesterdays, our todays, our tomorrows, we come with hearts of thanksgiving for a town and a people who have nurtured us and encouraged us from childhood until forever. And we thank you that they cared enough to scold us when necessary, but they loved us always. We're grateful, Lord, for the cloud of witnesses who have been our teachers, but our friends. And Lord, we offer thanks for this town, for this courthouse building, where so many of our memories are, our gathering place, our pep rallies, getting our first driver's license, our marriage license. We thank you, Lord, that you have walked with us through our people who prepared our path. So stand with Joy now as she shares her memories and her life with us. And we thank you for being the same all the time. We thank you for calling us your own in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Now I'm going to tell you about Joy. Joy is the fourth generation Rockwall County residents. Her daughter Liz would be the fifth generation, and her grandchildren, Bronwyn and Lloyd, are sixth generation Rockwall County residents. Joy is a graduate of Rockwall High School in 1970. Joy's grandfather left Rockwall County in 1918, the year that her father was born, to find newspaper work in Central Texas. And after 2 world wars, he returned to Rockwall. That was his dream, to come home. Joy served the Rockwall community in so many ways. She She served and owned the Rockwall Success as co-owner and co-publisher with her mother, Jane Bounds, that many of us grew up with. She taught English in Rockwall schools, and she worked as the RISD Public Information Officer until she retired. She says, until she retired after 30 years. But listen to what she did after she retired. After retirement, she worked for Dr. Bernard Fulton at the Green Hill School, the Fulton School, as head of the school for the Heath campus. Today, she is active as in the grief share program at Lake Point Church. Additionally, she and her husband have a ranch in Central Texas that they have to go to every week, and they have the most gorgeous, if you see her picture, of horses and cows I have ever seen. And they go every week to care for that place, and the place is called Jane's Place, after her mother. She continues to love the Rockwall community, the Rockwall school, and Rockwall's history. And sometimes she and I take tours of the Rockwall cemetery so we can look up all of the old Rockwall historical markers and people who created this wonderful community. She is forever a Rockwall Yellow Jacket. Because jacket fight never dies. But more than all of that, more than all the accomplishments, more than all the beautiful person that she is, she loves me. And she is my dear friend. I love you, Joy Bounds. And now I'm going to give Joy Bounds to all of you.
Thank you all for coming. And Norma, thank you. And Dawn, for all that you do. I'd like to thank the Rockwall Historical Society, Bryant Lee, the museum curator, Darlene McCollum Singleton. How are you, Darlene? And Ricky Wilcox, who invited me to speak. And Johnny Myers, who is the current president. Thank you so much for your dedication and the time that you spend in gathering Rockwall's history. We need you all. I'd like to thank my husband, Wilson Murphy, for his encouragement and technology support. And I'd like to thank all the friends who are here. I'd like to thank everyone for the opportunity to grow up in this community and to grow up in America. And there were two young women that I plan to introduce today who are business owners, but they were unable to attend, but I want to mention their names. One is Nikki, who offices in Sky Interest, which was Mrs. Babb's dance studio at one time. If any of you took dance from Mrs. Babb's, please see me after this presentation. Even Dwayne Kane.
I didn't take that.
He can't help me.
I was Baptist, I couldn't dance.
The history of Miss Babbs. And then Montana, who owns the businesses across the street where the Success was at one time. She was unable to attend today, but I did want to introduce them because they're two young women entrepreneurs, and they both graduated from Rockwall High School. So we're getting a lot of people to come back to Rockwall and have businesses here, and we're thankful for that. I'd like to dedicate this to Rockwall and also to my family. And most of those, well, all of those people are now deceased, but I'd like to remember them today. History recalls other newspapers that had been in operation at the same time as the Success, such as the Journal, the Herald, the Sun, the Banner, and the Chronicle. One of the donations for the Historical Society are these framed newspapers, and those are papers on the far left from 1899, the Success from 1899, and then the other framed picture are several papers that were absorbed by the Success. T.K. Bickley operated the Rockwall Sun and the Daily Letter. The Success absorbed most of the publications purchased and some discontinued publication for other reasons. Mr. Bickley, and I didn't include the information in this project today, but he was very interesting, and he had two daughters, and they operated, one of them operated the Daily Letter, and one operated, I think it was the Sun. But it was very unusual for women at that time to run a newspaper. But some of that history may be lost. I don't know. That would be a project for someone in the Historical Society. Dr. H.M. Manson was an early owner of the Success and was joined in partnership by Jeff Cox, who became the sole owner upon his death. And I think you're all familiar with Dr. Manson because of the Manson home and the historical donation of that home. The Rockwall Success was Rockwall County's oldest business. The Success, the first newspaper in Rockwall, was founded by Sid Crosbyton in 1883 with the assistance of Lynn Charleston. And Lynn Charleston, I have been unable to find much information about Lynn. The original masthead, the Rockwall Texas Success, was printed throughout its 105-year history, originating in 1883 until 1988. After operating the newspaper for a few years at the turn of the century, R.A. Dick Gaines purchased the business in 1910 and served as publisher and owner until June of 1949. Dick Gaines, you'll see his picture, Uncle Dick. You'll see his picture here at the 100th anniversary. He and my mother and my father and my grandfather were all very, very close. My mother consulted Dick Gaines on everything until he passed away. And he was the guest of honor at the 100th anniversary of the Success. As Norma mentioned in the introduction, my father and my grandfather were born here. But during that time, jobs were very scarce if you were not farming. And they were printers, publishers. And so when my dad was born in 1918, my grandfather needed work. And so they moved to Central Texas. And that was the dream to come home. And so the dream, after 2 world wars, the dream to come home, my uncle, Glenn D. Bounds, and my father, Philip J. Bounds, and their father, Philip J. Bounds, were coming home to start a newspaper. And as life would have it, My Uncle Glenn was killed in World War II. Was one of the largest casualties of World War II, and he was missing in action for several years before he was legally declared dead. But needless to say, he did not come back to be on the team. Jane Bounds and Dick Gaines continued a lifetime friendship, and I mentioned that. And this photo of R.A. Dick Gaines and my mother is there. And most of the items in the front at the tables are being donated today to the Historical Society. In 1988, when we sold the paper, my mother and I donated many things. We donated Dick Gaines' desk and other memorabilia. And now Bryant is going to take these new donations and combine them all together and make something wonderful. After June of 1949, the newspaper was published by my grandfather, my father, and I have already mentioned that my uncle was part of the team. And those are photos. That's a photo of my grandfather at the linotype at the Success, what we called hot type. And then my father in World War II and my Uncle Glenn in World War II. On the table, you'll see a display of hot type and type tray. Hot type was very difficult. It was very dangerous to work with. It was made with heavy molten lead, and each letter and each word of each sentence had to be put together. And you'll see the type, and the type is kept in those trays. And so each week, all the sentences in the newspaper had to be pieced together, letter by letter, with hot type. And we made the hot type in a big molten vat. And it would go onto a linotype machine where all the letters were typed and put in trays. And then each letter of each word of each sentence was put together in a big cast and rolled across the walls in the back of the Success on tracks. I don't know if they're still there. It was too heavy to lift and put on the press. And then after it was printed that week, everything had to be taken apart, all the letters had to be taken out, refiled, and you started all over again the next day. Mr. P.J. Bounds Jr., my father, joined the Harris. Did I skip a slide? I did. Yes. Mr. P.J. Bounds Sr. died in 1955, leaving Mrs. Geneva Bounds to assume his role as co-publisher till her retirement in 1966. Full ownership continued with Jane and P.J. Bounds Jr. And the first photo to the left, my father and James Taylor, my mother, my grandmother, and myself. My dad and mother, I guess you could call it, had an intern. They had interns, young people who needed careers, young people who needed jobs. And James Taylor was one of those young men. He grew up here in Rockwall. He worked at the Success for years until he became ill, and he died at a very young age. But there were many young people who worked at the Success and learned trades, learned the printing trade. And James was one of those young men. And that is my grandmother in the center, and she is standing in front of the Dick Gaines desk and the old cash register that Brian knows about, how heavy it is. And then the photo to the right is also on the table. That was the Rockwall 1954 centennial, the first centennial. And my grandmother made those dresses, and that is my grandmother to the left, and then Joy in the center, and my mother to the right. In 1961, Mr. Bounce Jr. joined the Harris Corporation in web offset printing. Now, offset printing came after hot type. Thank goodness. Hot type was so difficult and it was so dangerous. So many people were severely injured printing hot type. And so that's when computers were first coming in, and they were taking photos of laid out pages of newspaper instead of putting them all together with hot type. And that was called offset printing. So my father moved in that direction, and I don't have it here, but he sold his interest of the Success to my mother for $1. And she took it. And my grandmother retired in 1966, so. But mother assumed the sole owner and publisher and editor when my father sold it to her for $1. And then she let her 2 girls come in and help. So it was a wonderful time learning from your mother, who was a great mentor to many people. One of the highlights of the Bounce ownership was the Success 100th anniversary in 1983. It was marked by an open house at its downtown location. And of course, I've mentioned Dick Gaines was the guest of honor. Bill Hobby, who was in the newspaper business. And he was lieutenant governor. And Ted Lyons was at Texas House of Representatives. And I'm keeping those photos in my home a little bit longer, but then eventually you will get them, because I do not want them to be sold in an estate sale. The front of the Success is very important, and I wanted to make sure that I mentioned it today for a historical reason. And this is also being donated about Dora and Francis Lambert. They were farmers here in Rockwall. Many of you knew the Lamberts. Francis was a man. Dora was his wife. And they had a farm north of Rockwall. And on their farm, they had an outcropping of the rock wall. So Mother got the idea that she was going to remodel the front of the Success. And so she called Francis and Dora Lambert and asked if she could have some rocks from the rock wall. And of course, they said yes, and they brought up a truckload of them. And so the rock on the old Success building that is right across the street behind us is from the rock wall. So, Historical Society, if you have any influence, please don't let anyone paint it pink. Thank you. I've talked about hot type, but you can see that's a line type machine to the far left. And that's where all those little letters would drop. It had a keyboard, and you put hot molten metal in it, and you sit at a keyboard and type the letters, and they would drop out in trays. And so that's a line type. And that, the young man who's in the middle, not the one, I do not know this young man who's in the forefront, but my grandfather is the young man in the middle. And then my mother decided she would go to offset printing. And she told my dad she was going to do that. And he said, well, Janie, that sounds like a great idea. It's going to take a little time. And she said, well, I've already been to the conventions, and I know how to do it. I'm going to do it. And so he said, well, good luck with that. And so she did. She did it, and it was very smooth transition. And she had one of the first computers in Rockwall. And she actually knew how to use it. The success continued until December 1988, the year that we sold, and we sold to World Enterprises, and they purchased its name and complete operation in 1988. Later, the Dallas Morning News became owners, and the name of the success was removed from the masthead. The slogan under the masthead stated, serving the best interest of Rockwall County since 1883. Today, many people still remember the newspaper and a Rockwall of yesteryear. Throughout the various owners spanning over a full century, the success served the people of Rockwall as the communication hub of the county. And that's one of the last pictures made of my mother in the Rotary Club. She was the first woman in the Rockwall Rotary Club. And she loved Rockwall. And one thing that I always remember about my mother, and it's followed me throughout my life, is confidentiality. We heard things in our home. My parents were very careful in discussing things about people in the community. But we were always told, you never repeat anything you hear about any resident in Rockwall, period. You never tell anyone how you vote, period. And my dad would say, today's winners are tomorrow's losers. And that didn't really make sense to me then, but I understand it completely now. In addition to the success historical facts, I will share a child's recollection of the newspaper. And so I wanted to include a photo of my daughter, Julia Bliss, and my two grandchildren, Bronwyn and Blythe Ferris. Now, I have a big disclaimer on this next part. This is kind of the humorous part. This is told from my point of view, my perspective as a child in the 1950s, okay? Now, I've been walking the square the last couple of weeks working on this project and talking to people, and it is amazing how many businesses changed. So what you may have remembered even last year is no longer here. I also had so much fun going through some of the buildings. They let me go into some of their storage areas, especially on this side of the square. And many of the owners showed me the reconfiguration of these buildings, and I did not know that. They look the same on the outside, some of them, but they have been totally reconfigured. And so what was one building at one time is now 2 and 3 buildings. So I'm going to tell you what I remember when I was a little girl. Rockwall schools did not have kindergarten classes. You know where this is going. Parents took their children to work with them, or the mother stayed home. And my mom stayed home with my sister Jill until my dad needed her at the newspaper. And so I came with her. We were a package deal. So my days at the Success were very busy. Usually the day began with breakfast at the Mecca Cafe with my grandmother to Geneva, and then my dolls needed my attention. My playhouse was behind the paper cutter by the side of the printing press. Can you imagine letting children play hot type and molten? But we did. And they would say one time, don't go over there, don't go near that. And I didn't. I knew it would harm me. So I taught school and worked at the newspaper business at the same time. And that was the history of my life. Teaching school and working at the newspaper. We had a cot for nap times. However, I did not enjoy a nap. The cot mainly served for storage, or occasionally when someone else needed to take a rest. My grandmother and I would sell advertising to customers. We even drove to Terrell, Texas, to sell ads. My favorite daily activity was to walk around the town square and visit the local business people. The business owners nurtured me with their love and their kindness. I remember and love them even today after so many years. To boost my confidence in not getting lost, my grandmother and parents would chant, "Go in a circle around the square, and it will lead back to the success." This photo was made on July the 4th, 1958, and we had some great July 4th parades. We all rode our bikes. It was so much fun. Now, I don't know if you can see this photo, but I'm speaking about where it says store. We'll talk about that building that says store at the top. And then the next building, and then the next building says hardware. I have some questions about the hardware. Dwayne's tried to help me. We made a couple of calls on that. But in 1958, that was a hardware. And I'll get to the talking about that. That's what Ricky Wilcox did. He said, "I'm going to show you this, and I'm going to get to that in a minute." Okay, so starting around the square at the Success, which is now Montana's, that was the Success building. Smith Dry Goods was owned by Leon Smith. It was a magical place. He sold shoes, thread, fabrics, and clothing. He sold buttons. He had this amazing cabinet just filled with buttons. He was a great man. He was a wonderful, patient man. He decided he would become an attorney, and he studied in that office in the dry goods. And he did become an attorney here in Rockwall. He was our next door neighbor, and the sign now says Raymond Head Noodles, but it is now currently for sale. Deaton Grocery, Paul Deaton and later Clyde Maxwell and A.M. Shorty Rogers were owners of Deaton Grocery. Later the business became M&R Grocery, and they sold my very favorite Dr. Pepper for 5 cents a bottle, and then they increased it to 6 cents, and I had to take a penny, but candy was still 5 cents a bottle. Presently, the building is Human's Chinese restaurant. Andrew and Martin Hardware, it was just a wonderful, wonderful place. They had buckets of nails and ladders that rolled across the walls, and they let me roll across the walls. They had so many things. It was the only hardware store at the time. It is now, this is one of the reconfigurations that was very difficult to unearth, but it's now J10 Design, Brook and Blue Denim, and Margot Miss. The First National Bank later was the First State Bank. It was on the corner of Rusk and San Jacinto. Presently, it is Regal Realtors, and for many years it was Ralph Hall's office. And Brett, are you here? Brett's not here today. Okay, I thought he could add to that. But I remember it as a bank when I was a child. And I don't know if Regal's taken the floor out. Ralph left the floor in, but the original beautiful bank tile was still there. I hope it's still there. You all go over to Regal and see. I'm sure they don't take up that tile. Cunningham Drugstore was owned by the Cunningham family. Later it became Rockwall Drug, and it was owned by the Slaughter family. And they had a soda fountain, ice cream, sandwiches. They sold gifts too. Lots of fun things there. And now it's the Sonatas. And it's nice too, but it's not like the drugstore. The Mecca Cafe was owned by W.D. Buddy and Dot Lord. I ate lunch there almost daily. Chicken fried steak, homemade enchiladas, and cold bottled Dr. Pepper. And Inez Brandon would bring out a glass of ice and a straw. Now, if any of you knew Buddy, you know that Buddy didn't usually do that. Okay. But Inez Brandon was so sweet and wonderful, and she'd bring me ice with my Dr. Pepper. I'll always remember that. Harvey Sanders Corner Cafe. What a memory. It was owned by Harvey and Mary Sanders. Harvey would serve hamburgers, fries, and chili. That was his specialty. And while he worked, he would whistle so loudly you could hear him over the jukebox that played very, very loudly. Harvey would never turn away a hungry student. He kept a big sheet tablet by the register so that parents would know how much their children owed for lunch fees. I see heads shaking and smiles. You owed money, didn't you, MJ? Harvey coached Rockwall Yellow Jacket football with J.A. Wilkerson. And the Wilkerson Sanders Field is named after these two men. It is now Bloom Home Apparel. But Harvey did so much for this community. He was so good to Rockwall, so good to the kids. Rockwall was a poor farming community, and a lot of people, Rockwall schools did not have a lunch room in Rockwall High School and middle school. We had one in the elementary school, but not in the high school. So the kids would either bring lunch or you'd walk up the hill from the old high school and go to Harvey's or Mecca. Harvey's was more affordable. Those are memories that are lost. Rougeau and Rougeau Variety Store. And Ted Kane owned this and many other people, and I have been unable to find out much about the Rougeau family. If any of you know about them, I'd appreciate if you let me know. But Ted Kane owned it, and it was owned by multiple other people. But in this time frame, the Rougeaus owned it. And they had dolls, and they had candy. And they had a huge candy counter as you walked in. And I couldn't really count change. You know, I just go in there with a nickel, and I'd say, can you give me 5 cents worth of candy? And they fill up my bag. And they were very sweet people. I don't know what happened to them. They were not from here. I have no idea. But Santa would find my dolls there too. Mother and Daddy had to sometimes explain that. It is now Fire and Fable Bookshop Cafe, or Bistro. Spafford's Grocery Store and Market. Mrs. Christine Spafford and her husband Joe owned it, and they were very good friends. My grandparents, they attended the First Christian Church, and Mrs. Spafford and my grandmother always sat together. Joe, they had a refrigerated meat locker, and my mother would walk across the street to Spafford's Grocery after work, and that was 6 days a week. You know, everybody worked 6 days a week. And she would get the dinner meat entree from the meat locker and then take it home and cook it. Okay? We are so spoiled. But Spafford's, most people had a meat locker at Spafford's or somewhere. They, at one time, when it was the office supply building, the meat hooks were still hanging in the back. I don't know if they are now or not. I did not go back in that area. But it's now Lila's Clothing and Gifts. The hardware store, as I mentioned and pointed out, in 1958, the sign said hardware. I don't know when it became Western Auto, probably shortly after that. I'm not sure. But Western Auto was on the square. It was owned by Wayne Rogers. And he and his son Mike and Joe and I were friends. We were all friends, so we're still all friends. Our parents purchased our bicycles there for Christmas presents. Presently, the building is Bellevue Bistro. J.D. Holt Grocery. J.D. Holt sold cooked barbecue, and he delivered it to our newspaper for lunch. That was one of the first takeouts, was J.D.'s. We could take it out or he'd deliver it, whatever. My friend Jimmy Holt and his sister Naomi worked there in the business like Joe and I did in the newspaper. And we just grew up around the town square. Presently, the building is Amy Kristen's studio. And then later, in that same corner on Rusk and Goliad, Payne Furniture Store opened. And that is the family of Darlene McCall Singleton and Norma Muncie. Bab's Dance Studio. I took dance lessons there when I was 5 years old because it was at the end of the day and I was very restless by that time. And it was a good place for me to go and burn up energy. I cannot find Mrs. Bass. I don't know. She wasn't here very long. I don't know where she is. I don't know how long she lived after she left Rockwall. And I cannot find anyone. I found one person who did take dance lessons with her. Did you take dance with Miss Babs? Did you take dance with Miss Babs? Will you come up and tell about it? Will you come up here and tell about it? Come on, Patty.
Yeah, I'll just stand up to her. It was upstairs, and they had a pool table and a ping pong table, and also the dance part of the studio. And I don't remember, I don't think I was a very good dancer, but I remember playing ping pong and pool while we were waiting for our class to start.
I don't remember that. Thank you so much. Do you know what happened to Mrs. Bell?
Is that where we took dancing above American Legion?
Yes.
They took their Ben's honors?
Yes.
I took tap and ballet?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay.
Do you know what happened to
No, I
Mrs. Bell?
don't.
I think she was here for only a short time, but it's sad that we don't know what happened to her, but that's wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, so we do have people who did take dance there. And that was Ben Henry Zoller's law office for many years. The Rockwall County Courthouse. Some employees included Sheriff W.J. Price, and we're donating W.J. Price's farewell retirement pen to the Historical Society. I don't know how many of those are still around, but at least the museum will have one. Lanny Stimson was the tax assessor and county treasurer. Mrs. Barnes, the librarian, who had a very large collection, and I'm going to practice this word, taxidermized birds is how it's pronounced. Birds that had taxidermy. And Mrs. Barnes was the librarian, and those birds were the most fascinating things. They were here in this courthouse in the library. I have no idea what happened to them. But Mrs. Barnes was so sweet, and she was Anne Atkins Kane's grandmother. And she was very patient with me, and she would let me sit in these old windows and look at those birds. And I really appreciated it.
Those birds are at the museum.
Oh, I want to go see them. I'm so thank you for saving those birds.
Joy, repeat that. I couldn't hear what you said.
The taxidermized birds are now in the Historical Society, so you can go see them.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I did not know that, and I've wondered all these years what happened to those birds.
I did read there
I'm glad they were saved.
for a while, so.
Hermoin's dress shop was the shop owned by Hermoin Barnett. Hermoin and her husband lived in Terrell, but they had a shop here in Rockwall. She always had beautiful clothes, especially dresses at Christmas time. It was a special treat to have a dress from Hermoin's. Much earlier, the property was a bank. The bank vault is still in the building. And later, Stevenson Davis Insurance purchased it. And presently, it says Trevino's, but Trevino's is now closed. But I am told that maybe something else will be opening there soon. Martin Funeral Home. Hugh Torrance and Doris McKee worked there. It was just right across the street. I'm going down Hermeline's Martin Funeral Home. Doris McKee and Hugh Torrance. They were very patient with my visits, and I was very curious. And I'm going to leave it at that. But they were very sweet to me. I'm not going to say anything else. The buildings that were on the end were not, they were different things, but they weren't part of my walkabout. So now I'm turning the corner and I'm coming up on this side. The Presbyterian Church was on the corner of Goliath and Kaufman Street. It was made of old, beautiful red brick. The pastor was Dr. James L. Glenn, who was a great Rockwall historian. Dr. Glenn would let me view his library and touch his old books. Presently, the building no longer stands. It was torn down to make room for a parking lot. Yes, ma'am.
I used to go to church there, and I believe that it was condemned, though. It was dangerous. I remember there were a lot of dangerous spots in the church, so.
It was hit by a big semi truck, and the foundation was
It
compromised,
was off.
and that's why it was torn down.
That's why it was torn down. Thank you for telling me.
Also, Joey, Dr. Glenn's books are for sale at the shop at the museum.
Oh, Boblin, they are so. Dr. Glenn's books are very accurate about Rockwall history. Hornsby's Blacksmith and Welding. Okay, now we're on this side. Lester Hornsby was the owner, and he was a blacksmith and a welder. We still needed a blacksmith in Rockwall then. He welded my tricycle wheels after my parents continued to run over my trike. Presently, the building no longer stands, but it is in the vicinity of the Kane Family Park on the square. Lester was my best friend. His family descendants still live in Rockwall. I would just cry and cry and cry when my trike was just destroyed. And Lester would say it would be all right if he welded it back together. The Rockwall post office was just right over here behind us on this corner. It was very important to the success. The newspapers were mailed weekly from this location. So we just print and walk with big carts. And we'd walk across the street and mail out that night. The Success's mailbox number was P.O. Box 127. Presently, the building is Connor and Stewart Dentistry. The Ritz Theater was owned by Don Skelton. I saw my first movie there with my grandfather, and the movie was It Came From Beneath the Sea. I don't know why. But probably because it was the only movie showing, and they needed something to do with me. And so my grandfather was very patient, and he took me, and I was afraid. That movie came from beneath. You can still see it. I mean, it's still available. My grandfather died shortly after that, so that's one of the last memories that I have of him. And presently, it's South State Bank. The bank has changed names and ownership multiple times. G.H. Vault and Son Saddle Shop. Now go with me. We're back to the Success behind me now. And we're going to go through the Success building and go down the back alley. That back alley is still there. I checked it out. And the Vault Saddle Company was owned by the Vault family. The saddle shop was down the back alley from the Success. I would walk out the back door of the Success, and Mr. Vault would give me scraps of leather for toys and decorations. Additionally, Mr. Vault made things for me, such as a leather dog collar for my dog Spot, a leather heart slide for my cowboy cat. I wish I still had it, I don't anymore. And presently, it's Charlie's Hamburgers. Mr. Vault's saddles were so perfectly constructed, they became famous. And even today, if you Google and try to find a Vault saddle, they are very expensive. We had several of them, and they were in my uncle's house, and his house burned, so we no longer have a Vault saddle. But do you have a Vault saddle?
The museum does.
Okay, make sure you go see it. Keep it because it's valuable.
It stays in the house.
Yeah. I love this audience participation. It's just like teaching English almost. My daughter is to the left, Julia Bliss, and she is holding a 1980 copy of the Success. She was born that year, so she's not quite a year old. I thought it would be fun to have her picture holding the copy of the Success the year she was born. And one of my favorite all-time pictures is my mother and my daughter having a lemonade stand in front of the Success in 1987. So Rockwall's fun, you know, you could have a lemonade stand out in front of your business. Joe and I would weave potholders many years before that and sell them in front of the Success. So it was a different time.
Look at your mom's blue.
I know, I
Yeah,
wonder
and
that.
look, she has blue hose too. And she is smiling at her little grandbaby. So we're here to going in a circle around the square, and it will lead back to the Success. The Success was 105 years old when it left my life, but it has never left my heart. My life's journey has taken me on many roads, but none so important as the path around the town square back to my home, the Rockwall Texas Success. God bless Rockwall. May the memories of our home place be with us always. And thank you for your presence today and for your participation.